You want to depend on a cacophony called Cameroon. Are you handicapped? Why do we need to preach that buying guns against an enemy whose only solution has been guns is such a stretch? They tell you that they want referendum. Quick furniture. Asawana. I want to hear you say Asabuam. Asawana. They they believe that if they tell you enough lies, it is going to stick, because they propagate it with such boldness and loudness that it can be too bold, too loud to be false. They told you that Eritrea had referendum. That's how they got independence. That's where I want to start. Case study Eritrea. Their poster boy on referenda, pathway to independence. Eritreans were less than 1 million people. Ethiopia was about 80 million. Backed by Russia, even the United States, other Western countries, against Eritrea. They fought. Block by block, hilltop by hilltop. They make their own guns. They captured those of their enemies and redesigned to adapt them to their own terrain. They did not blink. They did not beg. They did not appeal. They simply fought, because they knew the power of Ethiopia that has salvaged Western imperialism from the anarchy of Adolf Hitler, that stood with the West in ensuring the demise of the axis of evil. They knew the power of diplomacy of the Kingdom of Ethiopia internationally. So Eritrea was not naive to waste its time in the corridors of power at the international level. Eritrea knew if it had to survive, it will have to fight. And fought they did. When they quote Eritrea as an example of a place that got independence through a referendum, you should know the truth. Eritrea got independence in 1991, what we call de facto independence. They had captured Asmara, their capital. Ethiopia was defeated 1991. The referendum in Eritrea took place 1993. And why? Why did Eritrea, after defeating Ethiopia, Comrade Isaiah, who is current president, call on the United Nations to live up to its moral obligations to call for a referendum for Eritreans' independence? Why, after capturing Asmara, Eritrean leader call on the United Nations to organize a referendum? I have some data here which is very important. Let's take it systematically. This data might be old, but it speaks volume. Of the 56 referenda on independence since 1860, 50 have held after 1944, with 39 holding after 1990. So if Asmara had fallen, Eritrea had gained de facto, and listen carefully to the word de facto, independence. Why did it have to call on the United Nations to organize a referendum? From this data, 39 of the 50 referenda for independence that have held since 1860 took place after 1990. And the reason is this. Post 1990 was the era of democratization, respect for human rights, and international legality. There were international values, international norms that you needed to adhere to be seen as a member of the international system. All or most of the referenda post 1990 was not for independence, was for international legitimacy. There were three fundamental reasons that, and I will come into this. The occupying states asking for a referendum as a face-saving means to exit after it knows it has been defeated. They oppress, rarely call for a referendum under an autocratic dispensation. Exceptions are in democratic pluralism, where constitutionally there is a clause that allows for a referendum. Scotland, Quebec. Under autocracies, the oppressed rarely ask the oppressor to offer a referendum. The oppressor uses referenda as face-saving measures to escape military capitulation. Each time you hear the oppressed telling you, give us federation, give us referendum, look, pack fine, put them in the boot of the car and drive them right down to Victoria. It's like, I don't know how to put it. John Frundi wins an election, the enemy ferries tanks from Yaoundé, locks him up in Tarinkon, and he was on VOA, Radio France, calling himself legitimate president. Or you find the other guy there in Nigeria, Mr. Obi, claims to have won an election, and is insisting that the courts in Abuja would declare him winner, not Tinubu. This is the level of naivety that you have in political figures in the continent. Eritrea is the first country in the continent of Africa that gained its independence from another black nation. And it was not through a referendum. Outright victory in the battlefield. The referendum was not for independence, it was for international recognition, political legitimacy, and very importantly, the international system loves precedent setting, that you use a democratic process to achieve an objective that reminds you of the method of ascension, and it becomes a normative foundation of your existence. Let me break it down. It means if you go through an election to achieve something, that election reminds you of the legitimate method through which you can achieve power. So let's factor in Amazonia. You ask people to buy guns. They can't buy guns. We were on the verge of capturing Boya when General Ivo was alive.